Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, coming to you from the Flamingo Hotel in Vegas. Had a nice little weekend here. Unfortunately, had to shave my beard, which I'm not saying it's the best beard in the world, but I enjoy having a beard versus not having one. Beard trimmer has broke. I'm back-to-back vacations. Not running hot in the beard trimmer game, but that's okay because we have tons to catch up on NFL free agency. It is just me today, solo pod edition. I love Dwayne McFarland. We have not broken up as work people, co-hosts, whatever the hell you want to call us. I just do not trust, unfortunately, the hotel Wi-Fi to actually stream someone in. So Dwayne will be back on Thursday this week. We're going to do what we did before free agency and go through all 32 teams. So for any reason my analysis is lacking, if I'm just forgetting something that is right there in front of me, Dwayne will be back on Thursday to help me see through all the flaws in life and mostly fantasy football. So with that, let's get going, everyone. When we came to you on Friday, Dwayne and I thought, hey, let's cover our bases. We'll talk about, Deshaun Watson going to the Saints or the Buccaneers, or excuse me, the Saints or the Falcons, because there's no possible way with all these reports he could be going anywhere else. And of course, Deshaun Watson ends up being a member of the Cleveland Browns, as we have seen. So I know this happened, quite some time. It feels like forever ago at this point, but similar rationale, honestly. We all know Deshaun Watson, all the off the field stuff aside, is a top 5 fantasy quarterback and most likely a top 5 real life quarterback as well. Top 10 real life if you want to, be stingy about it. But basically, history of the NFL, only Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert have averaged more fantasy points per game than Watson. So we still need to see what's going to happen with the suspension. But Cleveland, they give you a better situation than either the Saints or Falcons really did. You still have a number 1 receiver in Amari Cooper. I think we have more actually, especially considering once the Browns use a high round pick or so on a wide receiver, you're looking at hopefully two good wide receivers in that offense, along with David Njoku, along with Harrison Bryant. Amazing. The best run game probably in the NFL and anyone's idea of a top 5 offensive line. So everything that is going on in Cleveland on the field is fantastic for Watson's fantasy stock. If we can get away from the suspension completely, he'll be a top 5 fantasy quarterback that we're drafting. If we can't, he's still going to be someone that we're probably going to want to take, around spot 10 to 15, just because this is why we use points per game instead of overall ranks in Fantasyland, because when he is out there, he's going to be a difference maker. So with that aside, we can get back to, some of the lesser league shifting news, I guess you could say. Going to share my screen here, all you YouTubers out there. We also provide live video these days on Spotify, so gotta love that as well. And let's get after it, everyone. So yeah, last time we talked, I was it was right before the Watson thing happened on Friday. I think the Cole Beasley getting cut news was the last. So all the stuff I'm going to go over basically clears us up from then to now as I record this at 1 p.m. Eastern time, 10 a.m. in Las Vegas, West Coast. So yesterday, Matt Ryan was traded from the Falcons to the Colts. Fantastic news, in my opinion, for Michael Pittman, who has been my pick for those keeping track as the third-year breakout, getting more volume and hopefully a better version of the offense. The last 4 years, we've seen this be Chris Godwin first with Tampa Bay, then Calvin Ridley with the Falcons, and then Deontay Johnson with the Steelers. So I really think Michael Pittman moving forward could be that third-year receiver that we've seen flash and now all of a sudden has a chance for more targets. T.Y. Hilton and Zach Pascal have taken their talents elsewhere. And unlike those other guys, but at least, we'll take it for Pittman, he actually also has a higher ceiling now because of the quarterback play. So Carson Wentz last year was not good. He also wasn't one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. That's why when we were talking about him getting traded to Washington, it was a positive for Terry McLaurin. Wentz was better objectively than Taylor Heineke last year, as was Matt Ryan better than Carson Wentz. So pick a stat, pretty much any stat. Yards per attempt went to Matt Ryan. PFF passing grade went to Matt Ryan. Adjusted completion rate went to Matt Ryan. And this was with all the shit that Ryan had to deal with in Atlanta, that offensive line and everything. So I believe Matt Ryan had the fifth highest PFF passing grade from a clean pocket last year. Did not see a physical drop off by any stretch. The problem with Matt Ryan last year was that he had Kyle Pitts and Russell Gage to throw to, and that was basically it. So going to Indy, I'm not expecting Matt Ryan to all of a sudden, pull a 2016 on us and go absolutely bonkers. I don't think the Colts are going to throw the ball enough for that to happen, but just having Matt Ryan in that offense, it helps Pittman a ton. It helps Jonathan Taylor a ton. Now we don't need to be as concerned about the Colts having like one negative game script after another. That was a large reason why Jonathan Taylor was so good last year. Nyheim Hines is signed down. Like, he is their pass down back, but it doesn't really matter when I believe what the Colts had, like the third highest point differential in the entire AFC. So even though they didn't make the playoffs, this was truly a top 10 team last year in terms of just them beating down on opponents and having Matt Ryan over Sam Ehlinger, whoever the hell they were going to end up getting, some rookie. Maybe they could have gotten Baker or Jimmy G, but I'd honestly take Matt Ryan over those dudes as well. So great news for the real-life Colts. Great news for Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman's fantasy stock. Not so great news for the Falcons. Looks like it will be Marcus Mariota. We'll talk about him a little more in a sec. But yes, losing Matt Ryan, obviously bad news for the Falcons. And it's the type of way he plays too, because we've talked about the kind of things that mobile quarterbacks do for themselves in fantasy, but not so much for their teammates. So I think just when you just look at Matt Ryan and him being a statue quarterback, being someone that's going to dunk it down, check it down, and not actually going through and taking off and scrambling. It's like we say with Trey Lance in San Francisco. Trey Lance is great for Trey Lance's fantasy stock, probably not for everyone else. So it is good news for the Colts, not so much for the Falcons. And let's now pick up with Marcus Mariota, the Falcons' new starting QB. It's a 2-year deal. Apparently, it's more of a 1-year deal. So Mariota, we've only seen him in one extended game over the past 2 years. He didn't even start. It was a Thursday night game, Raiders versus the Chargers in 2020. Carr got hurt like really early on in the game. And Mariota came in and balled, people. 226 yards passing, 1 touchdown on a beautiful stroke down the sideline to Darren Waller for like a 30-yard score. And he, ran the ball 9 times for 88 yards and a score. We've always known Mariota has that kind of dual threat ability. He just didn't really utilize it quite enough in Tennessee for him to ever be too much of a fantasy difference maker. So I think we'll see a good game here or there for Mariota from a fantasy perspective. But just like Matt Ryan was just in, there's so little that I think Mariota can do to overcome this largely abysmal situation. Who the hell is the Falcons' number 1 receiver right now? And if you say Cordarrelle Patterson, you're damn right, but he is mostly going to be sticking to running back alongside Mike Davis, Damian Williams in the group. Kyle Pitts, I think, is a good to very good player already at this point in his career. This guy is still a 22-year-old by week 1 next season. So it's one of those things where Mariota, I think he's there like with the Trubiskys of the world. I'd probably still take Trubisky over Mariota this year, to be honest with you. But he's a quarterback that's more so going to be a streamer, late round super flex 2 QB guy. I don't think we need to really worry about him too much in traditional redraft leagues. Hey, maybe the Waller, game is a good sign for Kyle Pitts, though. I would note that they do play the position awfully differently. Yeah, they're both receiving first tight ends, but Darren Waller actually plays more in line like a traditional tight end. That's why I was so upset. Not really upset, fantasy football upset, which is always still a pretty good state of mind to be in when Kyle Pitts was on pace to break Ditka's record, essentially playing a different position. So Kyle Pitts, I don't think his fantasy stock really changes all that much. If you want to move him down a spot, that's okay. But I'll pull up Dwayne's handy dandy fantasy football ranks. I'll have my best ball ranks out next week, so don't think I'm just going to be skirting off of Dwayne's for the entire offseason. But yeah, if you wanted to move Pitts down 1 behind Darren Waller, I probably wouldn't because Pitts still is, his offense is just undisputed number 1 pass game option. I think those targets are so valuable that even going from Matt Ryan to Marcus Mariota, I still think that top tier Andrews, Kelsey, Pitts is in the right order. Saints re-signed famous Jameis Winston, 2-year, I believe $28 million contract. I firmly believe that the NFL is a better place when Jameis Winston is a starting quarterback somewhere. Just realized 2020 Jameis was not quite as fun as, the Buccaneers Jameis that we grew to love, particularly from a fantasy perspective. So Jameis last year, QB3 in week 1 on like 20 pass attempts, that wild Packers game where he threw 5 touchdowns and it looked like the Saints were a bunch of world beaters. Other than that, though, guys, it just wasn't a good year for Jameis. from a fantasy perspective. They weren't letting him throw the ball. Like his pass attempts per game were right down there, at the bottom of the league. Jimmy G level of just limiting Jameis Winston and what he was able to do in this offense. So after that QB3 finish, QB26, QB25, QB26, got another QB5 in there, and then 2 more finishes of QB15 or lower. So with Jameis, it's one of those things where if they unleash him, they let him throw the ball to his heart's desire. He'll probably put up some numbers, but even then, everyone, I came to this conclusion last offseason where I actually wanted Taysom to win the job over Jameis. Not so because I thought Taysom was a better real-life quarterback, but at least with Taysom, I was confident enough that we would have Alvin Kamara and Taysom as high-end fantasy factors. Probably Michael Thomas, too, to be fair. Taysom had multiple 100-yard games miraculously with Michael Thomas in that during his short stint under center back in 2020. So the thing that I kind of concluded, though, Jameis's overall career fantasy goodness has been overrated. If you just look at him, yeah, he had the great season in 2019, the QB8 in fantasy points per game. Before that, though, 2018, Jameis, QB 15 in fantasy points per game. 2017, QB 18. 2016, QB 20. And 2015, QB 19. So maybe that, LASIK change he made before last year is just going to be the complete difference. But again, last year wasn't exactly ideal as well. So I think overall, Jameis, more fun real life quarterback than fantasy darling. He doesn't run that much. And if you're not running, if you're not running, because think about it, like Ryan Tannehill, we're looking at like a less fun version of Jimmy Garoppolo, I think, is Jameis Winston. I know they don't play the position the same, but hey, Jimmy and Jameis both make a lot of mistakes. So I'm starting to come around on this argument a little bit as I talk it through it. But Jameis doesn't run, and he's in an offense that's not going to let him be the gunslinger that he was born to be. So I do think Jameis, again, you can make a late round case for basically any of these quarterbacks because you're not spending any sort of real draft capital on them. But I don't anticipate, being all in on Jameis as the Saints starter. It is great news, though, for Michael Thomas having, someone that can actually throw the ball deep. I did look in the past, is Michael Thomas' success only on slants? No, he was a top 30 receiver, I believe, in every single route that he qualified as, having enough instances of doing so. So yeah, the underneath stuff was better than the deep stuff. Guess what? When you're catching balls from Drew Brees, Teddy Bridgewater, and Taysom Hill, I think it makes sense that you be featured more in the short areas of the field. So right now, Michael Thomas, Deontay Hardy, not Harris anymore, looking at wide receiver. I would kind of expect a similar game plan, though, with that low volume ahead in 2022. Alvin Kamara is back. I know Sean Payton's gone, but the rest of the coaching staff pretty much retained. So something to keep in mind with Jameis. A lot of fun in the past. I'm not so sure we're getting that same guy in the year 2022. Finally, with a quarterback, Browns traded Case Keenum to the Bills. Okay, he's now going to be the backup for Josh Allen in place of Mitch Trubisky. And instead of paying Keenum what was actually a pretty hefty backup salary, they went ahead and signed Jacoby Brissett, former Colts, Patriots, most recently Dolphins backup. Jacoby's fine. He'll make 1 or 2 throws a game where you're actually like, holy crap, that was awesome. But he holds the ball an awfully long time, takes a lot of sacks, and just doesn't really give you a bunch of upside. So I think Jacoby is capable of winning half his games when he's out there, which is kind of all you can ask from a backup QB. But no, he's not going to be someone that we're going to be interested in fantasy land while, if and when Deshaun Watson is suspended. Moving on to running back, Buccaneers re-signed the artist known as Lombardi Lenny. Great thing for me to wake up to this morning because Lenny is really freaking good, guys, at least in terms of getting the freaking volume, which is all we really care about in fantasy football land anyway. So, last year, Leonard Fournette was a freaking baller, everyone, and it was due to both that volume and what he did with it. So most expected PPR fantasy points per game. Now, this is not, realized. This is based on your targets and your carries. Who was projected, if everyone was the exact same player in the same offense, who would have the most points based on that volume? Number 1 was Derrick Henry. That's what 30 freaking carries per game pretty much will do for you. Number 2, Najee Harris, all those targets. Number 3, Alvin Kamara, kind of a mixture of both those. And number 4, Leonard Fournette. hey, you freaking lead all running backs in receptions is going to be pretty good for the fantasy business. And for realized PPR points per game, number 1, Derrick Henry, number 2, Jonathan Taylor, number 3, Austin Eckler, and number 4, once again, Leonard Fournette. So a top 4 running back, both in his workload and his actual PPR points per game last season, Leonard Fournette. And, I said it before kind of this all started that Leonard Fournette would be firmly in the first round conversation in fantasy land when we would be looking at him back in Tampa Bay. A lot of PFF fantasy football Twitter trolls are quick to say something, but just looking at the potential for him to catch all these passes, score a bunch more touchdowns in the league reigning number 2 offense. You could not have asked for a better scenario for Fournette to come back into. And this is after we got that Patriots scare. So I will say, Fournette visiting the Patriots, probably worse news for Ramondre Stevenson than Damian Harris, because Stevenson has been the guy that we were, you kind of seen the Patriots dabble with a little more in passing situations. He's been up and down a little bit with it. So the fact that they were even looking to bring in another guy to not only steal early down work, but also more pass game stuff, I don't see the overwhelming love for Ramondre Stevenson. If he's going to be priced as like the RB40 or something, fine. I don't care at that point. But anyone that's going to be trying to treat him as this, borderline RB2, just too many mouths to feed in the Patriots offense that maybe they'll be as dominant as they were last year, but I could also see them passing more. Defense maybe isn't quite as good. And we get a situation where James White and Ty Montgomery are on the field far more than people would prefer. After Leonard, real quick with Fournette, let's see actually where he kind of falls in the running back landscape, because again, I just think it's going to be hard based on all that volume to put too many guys ahead of him. Jonathan Taylor, McCaffrey, Eckler, absolutely. Derrick Henry, sure. After that is where it gets interesting. I really think Fournette could slide in as the RB5. Najee Harris, Najee basically has the same role as Leonard Fournette. I just showed you. They were number 2 and number 4 in expected PPR points per game. Which offense do we want to invest in? The Steelers or the Buccaneers? Do we trust Trubisky over Tom Brady? I don't think so. I'm thinking Leonard Fournette RB5, everyone. So Alvin Kamara might have a word with that. James Conner has a massive workload. Dalvin Cook, I know we're used to putting him up there. I think there's enough concerns with his legal situation. And this is not an injury-prone, friendly podcast. We do not usually believe in that. But based on those shoulder injuries that Dalvin keeps experiencing, learned doctors have been indicating that could be an ongoing issue. Seahawks went ahead and re-signed Rashaad Penny. There's no place like home. I've gone through the list of, high-priced running backs leaving their team in free agency and just kind of how dismal they tend to be. The fact that Penny came back to Seattle, just like Fournette going back to Tampa Bay, was always his best case outcome. So with, Penny and just everything he was able to do in that back half of the year, it was impressive, guys. So really with Rashaad Penny, as I try to find my notes for Rashaad Penny, I think the one thing to really remember is that he never really had a chance to be healthy. And that was more so kind of the big drawback to Penny over the years. It wasn't like he was going out there and just absolutely busting time and time again. He averaged over 5 yards per carry as a rookie. It's just been a trouble to stay on the field. But if you look at what he was able to do last year, my God, nobody averaged more yards per carry at 6.3. Nobody averaged more yards after contact per carry at 4.5. Absolutely spectacular stuff. And he backed it up with some truly impressive film down the stretch. The problem, again, 37 of potential 65 regular season games since entering the league in 2018. He's also never caught even 10 passes in a season. It's looking more and more like my guy Drew Lock's going to be under center in Seattle. Maybe fun for red zone viewers, not so fun for Seahawks fans, and maybe not so fun for Rashaad Penny fantasy managers as well. It does seem like Chris Carson is trending towards a return. I think it's such a run-first offense that Penny could still be seeing, 15-plus touches per game, even with Carson in the picture. With that said, it's a situation where we're looking at probably a somewhat split backfield. The last time Carson and Penny were together, I believe it was late 2019. It was only 2 games, but they split that right down the middle. Look, they like Penny at the end of the last year. 17, 13, 17, 27, and 23 touches in his final 5 games. But they love Chris Carson too, and that's why they signed him in the first place. That's why they're working through him with this neck injury. So Right now, at this moment, I'd absolutely take Penny over Carson because of that neck injury. But the answer might go ahead and just be no between these guys because if they both stay healthy, we're looking at a split backfield with minimal pass down upside. I think for both guys when it's being split this way, and it's in an offense that if the Seahawks finish 30th in scoring next year, I don't think anyone's really going to bat an eye. So passing game still will be going through Metcalf and Lockett first and foremost. Maybe Noah Fant, maybe Will Dissly. Why the hell not? Seattle just not really an offense that I'm actively looking to invest in fantasy land. Maybe Penny does overcome it, though. We'll see. Carson's out of the picture. Penny gets a lot more interesting. Right now, I think he's more so going to be one of those running backs in the dead zone that I will probably be letting someone else draft in favor of a dope wide receiver. Falcons re-signed Cordarrelle Patterson. No place like home. Good way for them to kind of show that, hey, the last week wasn't all for nothing. But yeah, getting C-Pat back, this was always his best case situation as well. And I'll tell you what, if his, ADP isn't really going to change from being this low end RB36, RB40 he is right now, yeah, we're going to be back in on Cordarrelle Patterson. I just think that, what he's able to do in this offense, just getting fed the ball time and time again, both as a rusher and a receiver, it's hard to really just be anything but pleased about it. And this is, coming from the president of the Cordarrelle Patterson fan club. I just think that we finally have the situation, a team that gave him over 200 touches. Before last year, he never even had 90 touches in a season, not including returns, obviously. So 1,154 total yards, 11 touchdowns last year. Cordarrelle Patterson, RB1, wide receiver one, whatever you want to call him. The guy is truly an offensive weapon. So I do think Patterson, it's better if you can get him as an RB3. We want to get every single player in the league cheaper if we can. But I just think that with him going back to this situation, with them losing more and more offensive weapons, maybe we don't get 11 touchdowns again, but I still think that it's enough of a workload for him to still return potentially some good RB2 value. So is he going to – I don't want him to kind of be in that dead zone area that Penny's in, because if he does go too high, we're not going to be signing up. There's a lot of similarities to the Seahawks offense that I was just saying we should be staying away from, and this Falcons offense. So the difference is Patterson has a more fantasy-friendly receiving role that we can maybe wrap our minds around. We have less injury concerns there. C-Pat's someone where, hey, he sprained his ankle against the Cowboys and he managed to play through it. Not that effectively, but play through it regardless 2 weeks later and throughout the rest of the year. Patterson in Atlanta, slightly better for me than Penny in Seattle. But at the end of the day, if both their prices are getting high enough, I might go ahead and just be taking my shots at wide receiver at that point in the draft. Bills signed Duke Johnson, another one of my personal favorites. Why do I love Duke Johnson? Because the U's all-time leading rusher has always been one of the best running backs in the league on a yards per touch basis. Now, he's just been kind of pigeonholed into his scat back role in Cleveland and then in Houston because of, Hugh Jackson and Bill O'Brien, who nobody seems to trust anything they say about football over the years until for some reason it comes to Duke Johnson, who once again led the freaking Miami Hurricanes all time in career rushing yards. We're going to believe that Hugh Jackson and Bill O'Brien are saying, yeah, Duke's a scat back. You can't run on all 3 downs. Absolutely ridiculous. And Duke was fantastic down the stretch with the Dolphins last year. Is he someone to really invest in fantasy football? Absolutely not, unfortunately. It pains me. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Duke absolutely balls out this year. But Devin Singletary, honestly, I think just loses here more than anything. He's still going to be the number 1 running back in Buffalo, but at the same time, Duke will be taking some of the pass down work. Zach Moss seemingly really out of the picture, but I'm just not convinced that in a Buffalo Bills backfield, we have barely, literally the last kind of 7-8 games from Devin Singletary last year, we saw some legitimate high-end fantasy goodness out of him. That's pretty much it in the Josh Allen era. That dude is running as much as Michael Vick really ever did, and that's what, Dwayne and I were talking about a few weeks ago. So if it was only Devin Singletary, which it still could be. Who knows if Duke Johnson is even on the roster in week 1? I know they kind of signed him after missing out on J.D. McKissick, but we'll see. So I think Singletary is still someone where if you see his price dropping too much, I'd probably be more willing to get behind him than potentially Penny or Patterson. Penny and Patterson, we know they're not going to be in a legit high-end NFL offense. So Singletary has that working for him. I also think that if we look at these rosters and everyone stays healthy, you could also argue that Singletary is just in a position to see the most overall touches. some quick hitters at running back. Giants went ahead and signed Matt Breida. He's just going to be this distant backup. I wouldn't actually expect him to have much of a usable fantasy role. Still should be the Saquon Barkley show pending a trade or anything like that. Eagles went ahead and re-signed Boston Scott. Chill, Kenneth Gainwell, truthers. I see people do this time and time again. These rookies, they fall in love with, they end up being a late round pick. They don't do all that great in the NFL, and people just continue to hold on to their prospect evaluations. So maybe Gainwell's fine. I didn't hate him what he did last year, but you know who didn't really like him last year? The Philadelphia Eagles. Look who's all back coaching for the Philadelphia Eagles. Everyone. They don't love Kenneth Gainwell. That's why they played Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, Jordan freaking Howard ahead of this guy. So to me, Boston Scott just tells me do not touch Kenneth Gainwell because his own team doesn't want to touch Kenneth Gainwell. Raiders went ahead and signed Amir Abdullah. I saw this popping up in the news. I thought we might have talked about this already, but just real quickly, big concern about Josh Jacobs is getting that pass down work. We know he can do it. He's looked good throughout his really entire career catching the ball, but with Amir Abdullah there and Brandon Bolden, who would not matter on 30 teams in the NFL. The two teams he does, though, the Patriots and the team that has his longtime 10-year offensive coordinator, Josh McDaniels, also on the Raiders, unfortunately. So Abdullah and Bolden might be out there on the field far more than folks are hoping for Josh Jacobs. And oh yeah, Kenyon Drake's coming back as well because he got his contract restructured. So maybe the Raiders are just his top 10 scoring offense. Jacobs, Damian Harris is his way, into the end zone 15 or so times. That is a possibility. I just think that, his touch count when it's all said and done, going to be closer to 200 and 300, and it's going to be far more early down work than the fantasy friendly target share. Titans also re-signed Dontrell Hilliard. Hate this. He's going to play ahead of Derrick Henry on pass downs. And there were legit times last year. We all saw the, Super Bowl, Joe Mixon not out there on fourth down. That happened to Titans a couple times earlier in the year. Not in the Super Bowl. I would like to think that they wouldn't have made that same mistake. But they do this. That they don't keep Derrick Henry on the field in pass-first situations because they just don't. He's not in their plans for it. So Dontrell Hilliard is going to be the pass down back in Tennessee. Probably the preferred handcuff to Derrick Henry at this point. If Henry's going to go down, as we saw last year, Deontay Foreman did his best kind of lower middle class man's version of Derrick Henry, but just with having a pass down back like Hilliard and the way they want to use him, I think it's going to be a committee in Tennessee should anyone go down. I would note that losing Abdullah, though, from the Raiders, going backwards, Abdullah choosing to go to the Raiders instead of staying with the Carolina Panthers, that is great news for the guy I was just mentioning, Deontay Foreman, because Chuba Hubbard last year was not being used in the pass game. He just wasn't really effective at all. And so for Foreman to go out there and fetch, I believe that $3 million over 1 year, Deontay Foreman is suddenly someone in the later round of drafts I think we can take a chance on because, hey, if you're one of those people that are just not going to take Christian McCaffrey, the top half of the first round because he'll get hurt again, maybe you should be paying attention to Deontay Foreman because he's probably going to be the guy that steps up should CMC not be able to stay healthy once again. Thanks as always for sticking it with the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Moving right along to wide receiver, artist known as Bobby Trees, Robert Woods, traded to the Titans, now set to be, the Robin to AJ Brown's Batman. First of all, great news for Allen Robinson. Now we don't have to worry about him as much being, this number 3 pass game option in his own offense. Now the clear-cut number 2, we can actually start to creep him up more and more towards, I think, that wide receiver 2 borderline. So with that in mind, look, obviously everything's going to continue to go through Cooper Kupp, but Allen Robinson, I think when you start to kind of get into the group of your Mike Williams, your Jerry Jeudy's, your Cortland Suttons, Devontae Smiths, either guys that are in somewhat crowded offenses where they might not get the full featured number 1 workload or number 1 and more of a run-first offense, that's where Allen Robinson can fall. So my lovely co-host Dwayne McFarland has A-Rob as his wide receiver 26 at the moment. That is a spot I support. Best quarterback of his career. By far, we don't need to list all those guys again, but great news for Allen Robinson with this Robert Woods trade. It's not so great for Robert Woods. I mean, yeah, maybe he gets that Corey Davis role, but they're different receivers. I mean, Bobby Trees, I think what he brings to the table is more yak ability and also just, the ability to block. Like that was the big difference in that Rams offense. And I believe it was Benjamin Solak at the ringer, him or Steven Ruiz. Both guys are fantastic, but apologies for mixing it up. Anyway, they were talking about kind of extra things that Cup had to do as a blocker to replace everything that Woods brought to the table. So he is going to be 30 here pretty soon. I don't think Woods is someone that we need to really overly reach on in fantasy land. It might drop A.J. Brown down a spot or two, but more than anything, I think this just helps Ryan Tannehill. I mean, this is the guy that we should probably be looking at as a potential late round darling. I mean, Tannehill, what he's been able to do really all throughout his time in Tennessee, I think it's been going a little bit under the radar. 2019, QB 10 in fantasy points per game. 2020, QB 12. 2021, yeah, it fell off. Still the QB 15. So, I get it. He's not like the sexiest late round quarterback to draft, but you really have a nice floor with Tannehill. And I think once again, he's going to be standing out as a quarterback where, hey, we like A.J. Brown. We'll see how much we like Robert Woods. I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up in the top 36 or so. We like Derrick Henry. Maybe we like Austin Hooper. Maybe we should be looking a little bit closer at that quarterback. So I think Woods, better real life option than fantasy. Someone that's probably, better treated in that wide receiver 4 conversation. Guys like Gabriel Davis, Russell Gage, Corey Davis himself. I'd probably take those guys ahead of Robert Woods, honestly, but I think that's about his tier. And again, A.J. Brown still firmly a wide receiver 1 in real life and fantasy land. Chiefs went ahead and signed JuJu Smith-Schuster. This is a great real-life signing, and it also now leaves that, big hole in the Pittsburgh Steelers slot receiver. They're starting slot receiver. We'll see how they end up filling that. But with Kansas City now, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, still the undisputed top 2 dogs. I would not change anything about their ranks. Really, I think JuJu is just the final nail in the coffin for the potential meet Cole Hardman era. They might end up canceling each other out. I mean, Demarcus Robinson is out there taking visits. Byron Pringle signed with the Bears. So 3 wide receiver sets could very well be Tyreek, JuJu, and Mecole Hardman. I just think that JuJu, he's going to overlap far too much in the underneath areas of the field for him and Mecole to both simultaneously have big years. I'd lean towards JuJu over Mecole, at this point. But honestly, the answer might just be no. We've seen kind of time and time again in Kansas City, one receiver after another. Sammy Watkins, huge week 1 and then disappearing for the rest of the year like he's always done throughout his career. It's just a thing where it's not that Mahomes can't enable a number 2 wide receiver. He has been. Kelce and Hill go absolutely bonkers every single year, and there just hasn't really been enough meat left on the bone for someone else. So you got to look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire, maybe getting more involved in the passing game. Josh Gordon's there. I don't think JuJu is probably going to have the target volume to do anything close to what we saw in Pittsburgh. He was awesome earlier in his career, but he also looked like a different athlete in terms of what he was doing after the catch. And the big thing is he's just not going to touch these target totals. 166 targets in 2018. He's not going to come close to that. Maybe. I don't think he comes close to the 128 targets he got in 2020 either. So JuJu, I think he's going to have to make the most out of 90 to 100 targets. And hey, he's in the offense to make the most out of a limited opportunity. At the end of the day, though, he's just going to be someone where, if he's going up against a Corey Davis or maybe that's a bad example. I guess the Jets are a little muddled. All right. Someone like a Darnell Mooney, Brandon Cooks, where we know they are the number 1 options in their passing games, you got to take them ahead of JuJu 8 days of the week. Cowboys signed James Washington. Probably not a super usable role. A lot of the things I said about JuJu being the clear-cut number 3, at best pass game option also apply to Washington. He's honestly probably behind each of CD, Gallup, and Dalton Schultz. But I'm not giving up on James Washington. I think he has flashed occasionally a lot of times in the preseason. This dude has had to play with Mason Rudolph for 8 years, going back to Oklahoma State and then into Pittsburgh. And then when he finally gets a chance to start, he's playing, with Ben Roethlisberger's corpse under center. So James Washington is interesting. I think that he could be a good sign that the Cowboys are going to feature CeeDee Lamb in the slot this year because Washington, they moved him around a little bit in Pittsburgh, but I think of him at least more so as an outside receiver. You got him and Gallup lining up out wide. Slide CeeDee into the slot. It might not really matter. The Cowboys last year were really kind of stingy on it, so that's why I'm wondering if it is going to be that way. Cedric Wilson would only play the slot. So if there was a situation where they would have CeeDee in the slot with Cooper and Gallup out wide, but then Gallup got hurt, they wouldn't just sub Cedric in for Gallup. They would actually move CeeDee outside and then put Cedric into the slot where CeeDee Lamb was playing. as Cowboys fans kind of saw in the playoff game, a lot of frustration about CD and Cooper not being as involved as Cedric and Dalton Schultz. I just think the way Kellen Moore's offense works, they are going to be feeding the ball into the slot, into the inside parts of the field more times than they are looking to throw outside the numbers. And that's good news for CeeDee Lamb's fantasy stock. So James Washington, I think he's a solid like boomer bust wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 candidate. And he's one of these guys where we need to see kind of where the ADP starts to fall in best ball. But if he's going to be priced like outside the top 60 receivers or something like that, which is possible, we could be looking at a starting member of their league's reigning number 1 ranked scoring offense available for, a fraction of where I think, someone else that we just didn't have a couple years of evidence of him not being that great wouldn't necessarily be going. Like James Washington would be going outside the top 60, but if the Cowboys drafted, one of your favorite prospects in the second or third round, I'm sure people would be having him, 20 spots ahead, regardless of if that player in the year 2022 is actually better than James Washington. Bills signed Jamison Crowder, seemingly putting an end to the Isaiah McKenzie starting slot wide receiver dream. We'll see. It was only for $4 million, I believe. Crowder is solid. He's always been solid, and that's why it was kind of, I thought, insulting that the Jets, not exactly knocking on the door in terms of, overspending their salary cap these days, forced him to take a pay cut to even remain with the team last year. So Crowder, I would think they kind of do more so what they were doing at the end of last year, which was rotating Cole Beasley with Isaiah McKenzie down the stretch. They did bring back McKenzie, obviously, on a multi-year deal as well. So I think Crowder and McKenzie will ultimately cancel each other out. Mostly, this is great news for Gabriel Davis. It's looking more and more like it's going to be Diggs and Gabriel Davis 1-2 punch. And why not? What more do you need to see? The guy can go for 200 yards and 4 touchdowns in the freaking playoffs. Oh, my goodness. So, yeah, I think if anything, we still got to get past the draft, but the fact that the Bills gone through free agency and at wide receiver, they got rid of Beasley. They signed McKenzie to a small deal and they signed Crowder to a small deal. Maybe they go, try to draft a Drake London or Jameson Williams or someone, come April. But as things stand right now, Gabriel Davis is becoming more and more worthy of legit top 36 treatment in fantasy leagues of all shapes and sizes. A few more pretty meaningless wide receiver transactions. Eagles signed Zach Pascal, Colts wide receiver. Very solid. He's not going to do anything in fantasy. Devontae Smith is the only guy that we need to care about in fantasy land in Philly. And this is a great sign though for him. So seemingly Pascal, he's going to be taking either Jalen Reagor or probably Reagor's spot. Quez Watkins was objectively better than Reagor last year. Maybe he mixes in. Either way, this is the type of, low cost, like just we're not adding a first round pick here. This is not Calvin Ridley entering the offense because there's no available opportunities to even go around in Philly. Literally dead last in available targets at the wide receiver position. I think they even might have brought back Greg Ward. Like no one really left. Now, I'm not saying that Pascal or someone else can't come in and beat out some of the incumbent guys behind Devontae. I get it. The bar is not super high, but if we were going to add someone like Calvin Ridley to the offense, great news for Jalen Hurts, not so much for Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. I do anticipate them to once again be one of the league's more run-first offenses. It's good that Devontae is still, the locked-in, undisputed number 1 wide receiver in Philly. Jaguars went ahead and re-signed Laquan Treadwell. He's going to fight for snaps on the outside. We got Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, and now Laquan Treadwell all vying for opportunity. I don't think, credit to Treadwell for finally putting some good film out there in 2021. Took long enough, but I don't think he's going to be anyone that we're going to be looking at in Fantasyland. Same thing with the Steelers signing, kick returner extraordinaire, also technically a wide receiver, Gunnar Olszewski. I really got to improve my names. Sorry, Gunnar. Former, I believe, all-pro kick returner for the Patriots. There is an opening in Pittsburgh in the slot. I mean, James Washington is gone. JuJu's gone. Even Ray McLeod went to San Francisco. So maybe Gunnar becomes a slot receiver. I don't really think so. If anything, maybe we actually see a few more 2 tight end sets, Zach Gentry and Pat Freiermuth doing their thing. So if anything, the Steelers' kind of general reluctance to add another big-time wide receiver to the offense is great news for Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. Obviously not expecting Mitch Trubisky to put up that big of numbers, but hey, if we have Najee, Freiermuth, Claypool, and Deontay there, not saying all those guys are going to ball out. Like Claypool's not going to be a top 20 receiver necessarily or anything like that. I think one of him or Deontay will be, and the other one most likely will be outside of it. Either way, we can try to parse through this a lot easier than if they would have gone out and made a big splash, which they still could, but so far, so good. Chiefs also signed Corey Coleman, athletic spark freak from the past. Baylor, wasn't able to get his career going with the Browns, then started to do a thing or two with the Giants. Unfortunately, got hurt, and now's latching on with the Chiefs. Just a good long-term, not long-term, but just kind of a good dart to throw, I think, if you're Kansas City. Certainly wouldn't expect him to be fantasy relevant in the year 2022. 5 more signings to go through at tight end, everybody. Thanks, as always, for tuning in. Chargers went ahead and signed Gerald Everett. Not great. He could get what Jared Cook got, which was, I believe, 85 targets in the clear-cut number 4 pass game option behind Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. As a late-round dart, that's fine. Just don't get too excited. He is going to be splitting targets, routes, snaps alike with Donald Parham, who's back in business. And that's like the worst tight end that we're going to be splitting stuff with. And we've talked about in Denver, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Come on, Ian, Hamilton or something. Denver signed a block first tight end that was perfect for Alberto, and I apologize for forgetting his name right now. We've seen this throughout free agency where a team brings back just a complete block first tight end. That's the sort of tight end committee we can kind of wrap our minds around, not so much when the other guy is Donald Parham, who is basically more of a wide receiver that they call a tight end in the first place. So Everett, going the Chargers, he's an upgrade over 35-year-old Jared Cook. Maybe he does bust for, 9 or 10 touchdowns with Justin Herbert under center. But you're playing a dangerous game. You're really hoping that, if you're going to treat Everett as anything close to a top 12 tight end, you're basically going to be sacrificing 20, 30 targets versus some of these other guys. So Everett, he's right there. This late round tight end group is looking great, everyone. If you want to put him inside the top 20, I won't necessarily disagree with you. Ultimately, though, he's not someone I think we need to exactly be chasing in anywhere near the mid-early rounds of fantasy drafts. Packers re-signed Robert Tonyan. There's just nowhere to really look in this Green Bay offense and expect targets to go. Maybe they all go back to Robert Tonyan, just 2 years removed from the 11 touchdown year. Wasn't exactly going off in 2021. I'm not saying he needs to be thrown back into the top 10 by any stretch of the imagination. My God, Devontae Adams is out of the picture. Packers really haven't gone out and made any splash moves at wide receiver other than getting rid of Devontae Adams. Obviously, I know there's still some big names out there. Not done. Free agency isn't over. They could trade and draft, but Robert Tonyan is looking at the potential to have the biggest role of his career with Aaron Rodgers under center. We know the guy can score double-digit touchdowns. Now, there is a good chance that 2020 was the best year of Robert Tonyan's career, but taking Adams out of the picture gives him new life. And look, if we're looking at someone like Robert Tonyan versus Gerald Everett versus our next guy, Austin Hooper, I'll probably take the one that just has the better chance of being a legit top 3 option in their own passing game. So Robert Tonyan is someone that I really hope doesn't get slept on because, everyone wanted to yell touchdown regression last year, and it was going that way. I'm not trying to say that 2020 was shaping out to be the best thing ever, but I feel like sometimes like these players have great years and it's almost like used against them. Like, Robert Tonyan's never going to catch double-digit touchdowns again. Like, I don't know. Maybe not. Aaron Rodgers under center certainly helps, and him being back in the most familiar offense and the only offense he's ever been in also certainly helps. Titans signed Austin Hooper from the Browns. This is good for both parties involved. Now with the Browns, David Njoku, once again, in that late round tight end conversation, probably even worthy of, mid kind of that tight end 14 to 15 range. I've seen some people already throw Njoku in as a tight end 1. I'm just too worried about Harrison Bryant, honestly, maybe splitting things between them, but at least taking Hooper out of the picture objectively makes Njoku a better fantasy dart throw this year. Why the hell not, people? With Hooper in Tennessee, though, they have brought back Jeff Swaim. We got to see what happens with Anthony Ferkser, some of these other guys going on, too, that are still unrestricted free agents. Tentatively, though, Hooper should be the tight end 1 in Tennessee. It's a role that we've seen plenty of production go to as a whole, not so much to one player because they've just used, like the Browns, consistently 3 tight ends over the years. So Hooper is someone that maybe, if we see that week 1 snap rate just booming, we can get behind. I mean, it's not like he went to Cleveland and just like he busted compared to his contract because they used him with David Njoku and Harrison Bryant. Like there was only a couple times where Austin Hooper was even playing like 80% or more of the offensive snaps. Why was he given such a big contract and not even be a full-time player? I have no idea, but he's still only 27 years old. We saw what he could do with Matt Ryan in Atlanta. I mean, I think Ryan Tannehill is capable of enabling more than one, fantasy relevant receiver if he gets a little more pass game volume. Similar to, I think the point I made with McCaffrey earlier, where if you're out on McCaffrey and think he's going to get hurt, you should be looking at Deontay Foreman. If you think Derrick Henry is just, too old, too many miles on the tires for this, and he's not going to be able to stand up throughout the whole year. Maybe you should be looking a little bit closer at the Ryan Tannehills, Robert Woods, Austin Hoopers of the world. Dolphins re-signed Durham Smythe. Just, Mike Gesicki actually broke the news on Twitter. They seem like they're really good buddies, which was pretty funny to see. But yeah, this is best case for Gesicki. It's someone that does play in line ahead of Mike, but it's someone that we've also seen the offense have no problem with featuring behind Gesicki in the passing game. So Durham Smythe, coming back into the offense. No, he's not going to be a fantasy relevant guy, but I do think it's good news for Gesicki relative to like if they would have brought in Gerald Everett or like more of a pure pass catcher into the equation. And finally, Raiders went ahead and signed Jacob Hollister seemingly to work as their number 3 tight end behind Darren Waller and Foster Moreau. Maybe he competes with Moreau. I don't really think so. Either way, Darren Waller is absolutely fine. And that's going to wrap up this edition of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Appreciate you guys hanging here with me. Just checking the news. Oh, man, it's Malik Willis Pro Bowl bomb day. I hate these Pro Bowls. They show the quarterback making the same damn throw where he, rolls out, boots to his left, and then just uncorks one like 70 yards downfield with not a single hand anywhere near to him and with a wide receiver that doesn't have corners. So I don't know. Like, it's just, he can throw the ball long. That's great. I'm happy they can throw the ball deep. Just the Pro Bowl, I was saying Pro Bowl, pro days. Either way, come on. How many games do we have with this guy? Who cares about the pro day? If you want to go and get medicals and shit, that's fine. But like, why are we obsessing over clips when we have Malik Willis doing bonkers stuff against actual like college competition inside of an actual game? That's the thing with like the Senior Bowl too. I think the Senior Bowl gets overrated. Like, yeah, it's a cool opportunity. I think, companies send these guys and these analysts and they go there and they want to kind of make something out of every drill and all this. And I'm not saying we haven't found some gems over the year. I know Cooper Kupp's a good example of, hey, Rams saw that he was actually faster on the field than his 40 time meant. And that's why they were more comfortable taking him in the draft where they did. I just think that we should be, it's fine to be a piece of the puzzle. I'm team never ignore information. Like, let's sort through it and try to weight it appropriately and see how significant it is based on history and anything we can do to check that. But the fact that I think it's March, so we're going to obsess about pro days and we're going to obsess about the combine. We're going to obsess about the Senior Bowl. We're going to obsess about a lot of things that aren't actual 11 on 11 live football that isn't just, kind of bowl game where people are half just trying not to get hurt as well. So yeah, good for Malik Willis, but I don't want to hear people saying like, oh, after that pro day, my God, let's move him up the ranks now. Do you see that throw he made against Air? Like, that was incredible. So now that I got that off my chest, we can go ahead and close out this edition. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, I know sometimes might not be the best listening experience for you all when it's just me going solo. A little harder to break up the breathing and all that, but appreciate you tuning in. I'll be back with my trusty co-host, Dwayne McFarland, on Thursday and beyond. We'll get Nathan Yonke, Kevin Cole, the whole PFF Fantasy crew back in action. I invite you guys, if you weren't able to catch all of these podcasts, I did come out with an article today. Actually, that's just 12 fantasy football takeaways from 2022 NFL free agency. I've updated the PFF fantasy tracker, throughout all of last week. Not so much early this week. But letting Vegas get to me a little bit, trying to have a good time, everyone. But with that said, I really did take time to go through the most fantasy relevant things yesterday and got those 12 big takeaways. So a lot of them are actually talking about multiple players. So a little bit under 5,000 words, but I think if you have, been missing out on some of the stuff going on, that'd be a good way to catch you up. And like I said, we'll be back Thursday going through each and every NFL team. That one's probably going to be maybe even 3 hours. I don't know. I love talking football. Not going to apologize for that. So thanks again for tuning in. My name's Ian. And until next time, take care, everybody.